I'm curious, though, the dust has settled. Let's do a quick report card on Ireland of sorts, not least because the opposition tonight, Ireland beat one, lost to the other. Do you feel, Shane, that Ireland underperformed? So I think emotionally that night there was a great sense of, listen, they gave it a great shot, they did really well. You don't always get the bounces in sport, but you couldn't really be too critical of the team. Now maybe the analytical brain has kicked in a touch more. Should we be more disappointed with what Ireland produced or no?
I think we're right to be massively disappointed, and they'll be massively disappointed. But I think we have to separate the result from the performance across the World Cup. The result is the same as our best performance in any other World Cup, which isn't great, which is really poor for a nation like Ireland. But the performance, I think, was probably the best that Ireland have performed in a World Cup. Beat the Springboks in the way that they did in the group stages. You know, flawless, pretty much rugby in the group stages. And the problem was we came up against New Zealand. Now, did Ireland play their best possible game against New Zealand? No, they didn't. They'll be disappointed with that and they'll have regrets. Did they choke or run out the gate? No, they didn't either. So, you know, it's not always one thing or the other. Yeah. What they did was they delivered slightly off performance. New Zealand were really on that day, as on as we've seen them in this World Cup. You know, Ireland paid the consequences for it. As you said, you know, we're in a World Cup final here. They've beaten one, and you know, they've either beaten the world champions in the World Cup or they've been knocked out by the world champions in the World Cup. It's cold comfort, and it doesn't progress us, and it maybe makes next time around even more difficult. But at some stage, we have to get this monkey off our back, and this team, and where they go to potentially, are our best chance.
Yeah, it's just a game of centimetres. You know, like if Geordie Barrett's hand wasn't under the ball when Kelleher goes over the try line, they're in the final. It's an Ireland team playing tonight. That's the margins. And I've heard a lot of people, you know, raking over the coals and saying, oh, they should have kicked more. You kick more against the greatest counter-attacking team in the world? No. The only question I have, and I've brought it up before, is they weren't at their best that night. Our lineouts were off that night. The scrum penalties, again, I've spoken to, you know, really well-respected props and hookers who all said that the referee got it wrong with Porter, that 3 of those penalties should have gone his way, to Porter rather than against. Now, that's a game changer. And the last bit on that is Ireland did play their full team the whole way through the tournament. No one else did. Did that take 10%, 5% off them in that quarterfinal? That is a valid question for an analysis of the coaching staff. But to you know, try and bury the team and say, oh, the tactics were wrong, that's just not right. They performed exceptionally well, as Shane said, and they came up short. And someone's going to come up short tonight. That's the game we play. And just because you come up short doesn't make you a failure. It makes you breaks your heart, and you can be exceptionally disappointed. No one's saying that. But there's a big difference in that. I would not question the Irish tactics in that game. I would question the selection leading into the game. OK,
that's fair. On the Irish tactics, Rob, I've seen the point made, and I do understand where it's coming from, that maybe between the World Cups, the 4-year cycle, it is a different style of rugby to what tends to get the job done in the white heat of the knockout stages, that there is such a thing as cup rugby, and that kicking the ball, I take your point, kicking the ball to New Zealand, not a good idea, but South Africa, New Zealand against Ireland, they kick the ball that bit more, they almost let the opposition punch themselves out. There's kind of when a pressure takes hold, there's like a teak toughness as opposed to sophisticated passing rugby, which tends to win the day.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we have to be very careful that, first and foremost, we have to remember that the margins were minuscule. Okay, so we all recognise the margins were so small. We have to be really careful we don't go subsequently and look at the stats of those games and then draw conclusions about the style of rugby based on those stats. I think the type of rugby Ireland played was still the best rugby we've ever played going into a World Cup. It was the best type of game that gave us the best chance to advance past the quarterfinal stage and to win a tournament potentially. But just on the night, we just weren't quite at the level. And I got criticised a huge amount and it wasn't in any way a sense of arrogance about it, but I still think that if Ireland played 90% of what they were capable of, they would have beaten the All Blacks.
And the disappointing thing for them is, I don't think that they got their sort of rolling plays or their phase play at the highest level, as good as we've seen it. They haven't. Now, listen, New Zealand played a big part in that. But the two elements I think they'll be really disappointed that were within their control, even more so than that, are set piece, the line-out. The line-out didn't function the way it should right the way, probably through the World Cup.
Yeah, from the warm-up games.
And that's not something that you can have and be successful in the World Cup.
Fair point.
We know that. And then the second point is they got done on a four-man line-out. Now, New Zealand hadn't pulled a four-man line-out in 2 years, but Ireland weren't prepared for it. Okay. And that little bit of disjointedness in it cost them a try, and that cost them the match.
Zero tackle try. And line-out, win the ball try. And that just absolutely crucifies you in a big game.
Yeah, but also absolute outstanding rugby from Richie Mwanga.
Yes.
And that is what New Zealand bring. They bring a couple of players who are just outstanding X factor and ability to turn a game on its head in the blink of an eye.
Very quick one, and we are out of time. We will reconvene in the Six Nations and chat about this in a lot of depth. Sexton now out, integral to everything that Irish attack was doing, you suspect. So will the style of play change just automatically, or can they just say, let's just implement the Johnny plan again, everyone?
Well, I think Johnny was integral to building it, but this is maybe part of his legacy, that we've maybe seen a change in the way Ireland play or approach things, certainly for this generation. Now, Rob made a very interesting point there when he was talking about this style of play maximising Ireland's abilities, and I think it does do that. So while the genesis of this play originally, I think, was with Joe Smith, and Joe Smith and Johnny had such a sort of symbiotic relationship as a coach and captain, or 10, that developed and built over time and was added to and became better under Andy Farrell. But I don't think Andy Farrell is ready to say, let's leave that all behind and go back to a different type of game or be influenced by the type of rugby we're seeing other teams have. I think Ireland are very comfortable with their style of rugby. Now, they need to find a 10 to deliver it, and that is, that question's still out there.
Yeah.
But we've got some candidates.
Okay.
And it's interesting that style of rugby is based on the skill level of the forwards.
Correct.
And we saw last night in the England Argentina game, the forwards of those teams are not at the same skill level as the Irish forwards. So it's not just the 10, he is integral, but the skill level of the forwards allows Ireland to play the way they are.
Okay, fair.